Oh. That's
Except when I'm here, then she's the boss.
oh, okay.
I call her Ms. Perfect.
Call the Town of Bristol Water Commissioners meeting to order for Monday, April 15th at 6 p.m. Is there any additions or adjustments on the rules on the agenda, Valerie? She's left. That's the only removal. Valerie's gone.
And she's back.
And she's back. Any additions
You
or
did a writing implement.
additions or adjustments on the agenda?
I do not believe so.
Okay, regular business. Revisit follow-up to the DWSRF
There it is.
RF3 dash 477.3.10
Yeah,
loan offer.
right.
I saw some comments on the email, so I'll let you
Right.
start in, Valerie.
Yep, so at a previous select board / water commission meeting, we reviewed the terms of the loan that we were offered, and it was quite disappointing from what we expected. And the select board / water commission at that time felt it would be appropriate to follow up directly with the governor's office and others in the spectrum to try to persuade, again, reconsideration of the loan terms. And since then, I took some time to study the email chains more closely of the calculations that led to the outcome of no principal forgiveness, the 30-year amortization instead of 40 years, no relief on the administrative fee. And concluded a little, and along with input from Jill and Steve, their thoughts and experience in reviewing the situation, that we may risk jeopardizing long-term relationships with the agencies by keep pushing back. So this is just an opportunity to reconsider that, whether that is the course of action the select board / water commission wants to take. And maybe there's an alternative route. And one thought that I have, and it's just one thought, and I spent some time noodling about it today, is that we do provide some feedback, but more in a constructive way. Share what our experience has been, what are the levels of our disappointment and how we got here, and how, if we'd been advised earlier of what the benchmarks and the metrics are going to be, and of how these loans are going to be calculated, then we would have had the opportunity to make different decisions, broaden the scope, include another street in the Pine Street project or other things like that. And also reading through Amy's analysis again and again, the ERU calculation played a major role in the outcome, that it was a higher ERU of 695 than what we had expected, which was 633. And apparently that the higher the number, their metrics calculate the rate to be lower. So it didn't, in other words, we didn't qualify for the principal forgiveness in large part because of that higher ERU number. And if I understood correctly, that higher ERU number was the result of having accepted at least 2 different consecutive exempt water systems into our district. So that changed how the ERUs are calculated, even though the number of connections actually didn't change. So anyway, those are some of my thoughts, and then if we instead could prepare a letter outlining these points. And also, I mean, there are several points I could go through them one by one, but there's a bunch that we could throw into a letter like that. So those are quick thoughts.
Okay, anybody?
Well, if that's the way the board chooses to go, I'll go along with it, but the idea that if we complain, that it will be held against us in the future is not
Retaliatory.
Yeah, it's not right. And the problem I find with all the people in state government is they have a job to do, and for the most part they do it. But the idea that it's what they say, they work for us. you know, and I was told by the head of Act 250 at one point, and he pointed right at me and said, don't tell me I work for you. And I remember thinking to myself, you son of a bitch, you do work for me.
Here you are, okay.
I know where I am.
Okay,
And
okay.
I just, that's how,
I know Tito you are.
yeah. And I just, the idea that you know, Governor Scott has he said that he wished that state government would take the attitude of the fire service, and I'm here to help you. And what can I do to make this happen? They shouldn't be telling us why we don't qualify. What they should be doing is telling us what we need to do to qualify.
Exactly.
so
They
that
should have
we-
been doing that before we.
Yes.
Exactly.
Instead of telling us that this program was out there and we're eligible for this. And I just, you know, if somebody comes into your office and complains, you don't just tell them, well, that's the way it is, and send them away. You explain to them what the situation is and see if we can do something to rectify it. And that's not what's happening here.
Right.
And it's very frustrating. And Jill's the only one that's frustrated.
So how, we,
No?
We-
Oh, size here. Yeah, well, obviously I'm frustrated too, so.
You got him to leave the home at 6 o'clock at night after working 11 hours, so that's.
Yeah.
so as this project went along, we had multiple meetings, and in those meetings, we were told that we would qualify. If we didn't know that how we were gonna qualify, why are we being told that? Why were we told that in the meetings? Like, what changed then?
The people that we were meeting with apparently didn't know what the metrics were that went into the calculation. There are 5 different levels of analysis that Amy explains in her long email
Yeah.
thread. And it also depends on what we put in the loan application. So they relied on the information we provided in the loan application, which people at the table here during the project didn't know what that was. That was a different division. And we didn't know what the metrics were until after the loan was processed. So I mean, there's some legitimate reasons why maybe the staff folks were not able to provide us feedback earlier because they were relying on information we provided to them, which well, the loan application went in August after the project was completed. So, or not after the project was completed, but anyway, during the project. Yeah. So.
The other thing that's really frustrating is this is a fund that was created with ARPA funds with the idea that it would help people, and to charge us an administrative fee for something that could have been or should have been, in our eyes, should have been forgiven is ridiculous. I don't want to take it laying down. This is the second time. The last time was USDA on West Street, where, you know, we were promised, and what were we told there? When we complained there, we were told, well, that guy misinformed you and he's been let go. I just.
Sorry. I'm somewhere in the email, he said twice, he said somewhere this is the 3rd time. 3 strikes and we're out. Did I read that wrong, or the 3rd time?
No, I read that.
No.
We've been back to them more than at least 3 times.
Yeah,
We've gotten
we
3
can give you a little bit more
declinations.
of
Or
a
where's the
history.
3rd one?
We can give you a
Besides
little
West
bit more of a history. No.
Our
So-
efforts to have them
She
reconsider.
came to us initially and said, oh, you don't qualify for the grant. And we said,
Which street, when we talk,
this
this,
is for
part?
Pine Street.
Okay,
So we're not talking about how many times have you embarked on projects, been lied to by your funding agency and been misled. This is on this particular project. She came back and said, oh, look at that, didn't qualify for any grants. And we're like, what? So we set up a meeting with her, Steve, Valerie, and myself, with Amy being the one who reviews these loan applications supposedly in a timely manner. So apparently 1.5 years is considered timely. So we're looking at, she explains this to us, and we're looking at the calculations and we're like, that doesn't make sense. When we read water meters, we have 633 water meters that we read. We have 633 connections. Why is it $695? So I took the water read and got a quarterly report from highest user to lowest user, detail on every single one, and said, that's how many units we have, that's how many connections we have. And furthermore, if you look towards the last several pages, we have a lot of users that are dry businesses. They don't use as much as a single family home. So if an ERU is an equivalent residential unit, and they're saying that a 2-unit apartment building is 2. Okay, I'll give you that. But what is a copy business where a bathroom gets flushed twice a day? That is not the same water use as a residential unit. Nor is a town office that just has a bathroom being used, nor is the other 50 dry businesses that are in town, for instance. I can understand that an apartment might count as more than one. I asked, how is the CRU number established? Well, it was established when they did your sanitary survey. And I said, well, why is it this number and not matching my number of connections? Oh, someone in the water division determined it's this number. I said, it's just significantly higher than my number of connections. Oh, yes, well, those exemptions on the consecutives also added to your ERUs. And I said, hey, if those ERUs are being divided into the cost to compare median household income to 1% of median household income to the cost of the water system, and those 1 meter pit is 1 connection, and all the water system after that pit does not belong to this water system, nor does it need to be maintained, why is our grant eligibility being determined by those units? It's just how it is. I said, I disagree. I'd like you to reconsider. So they went back to their management, came back and said, no, we can't change your ERU number. We feel confident that that's your equivalent residential unit. So lost on that one. Fast forward. So we then asked, well, the money for Pine Street's already been expended. That was expended at a particular rate of borrowing. There's interest to be paid. There's also additional other project expenses that we had that were also deemed ineligible for funding, but they're truly costs to the water department that ended up getting absorbed by the operating budget. Can we put those in the project? No, we already determined they're not eligible. Then we're like, okay, is there some other cost that we missed? We can't, those are the 3. Cyrus actually called Senator Bray and said, this is ridiculous. Like, we are very uncomfortable with this loan offer coming back at an interest rate at just a 30-year, basically the project costing far more than it should have based on all of the information that we were all fed about the program and about how this was going to work. So Senator Bray also went and spoke with them. We've gone back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, and she's come back with, here's your final loan offer, sir. Your final loan offer, it's gone through the bond bank, they've approved it, hooray, you get your money. So, okay, so the money can be extended out and paid back the town for the money that was used to pay for Pine Street, and you now have a 30-year loan at 2%, but now the water rates need to cover that, and that's only a half a mile out of 10 miles. So I look at that as there's 19 more of those to do. There's 19 more half miles. So the person from the bond bank is asking for us to respond on, how do we see this future financing going, and how's the indebtedness of the water company gonna look, and da-da-da-da-da. And I can't help but want to react very snarkily to say, well,
Has to stay.
we're supposed to be eligible for a 50% grant. How are we supposed to move ahead with all the different parts of this project with such a discomfort in this program? At what point do we finally get the grant? And, Amy had said, oh gosh, on the next one, you're more than eligible. I want it in writing. That's the funding year that Pine Street is in the funding year that's about to end June 30th. There's a new funding year starting July 1st. That's another intended use plan and pocket of money. So what I want to know is the intended use plan for the Pine Street year that it went to construction if there's a bunch of grant money that went into that year in that pocket, and it all doesn't get used and allocated, it can't go to a future year, has to go to the people in that pocket. Do we have a chance at getting some? I don't know if this is like a final, I've seen it only happen maybe once or twice, that there's additional money and they go back and they do grant forgiveness, but what they're saying now is the way they're calculating this, they're looking at 1% of the median household income as impacted by our current costs, including this loan, including the loan on step 2 of the rest of the West, and saying it's not expensive enough, you don't get a grant.
Is this loan, we keep saying bond bank, is this loan through the state of Vermont? Is the state of Vermont the one who's fronting the money with ARPA funds? Or is this actually a loan through a bond bank?
It's a
It is a
revolving loan
loan,
fund,
so,
isn't it?
so the program is called the Drinking Water State Revolving Loan Fund, the Drinking Water SRF, right? And they have intended use plans for each year of that pocket of money. The bond bank is the banking mechanism that does the financing for all the loans. I don't quite know how the loan forgiveness. I think it just, it
So who-
excuses a portion of the loan to be paid back.
Who makes the, so the bank makes the money,
If we
the
had,
bank gets the interest,
if
not
we-
the state.
I don't know who gets that 2%. It's called an administrative
It
fee.
looks
I
like
don't
the
know who
state
gets
gets
it.
Our payments go to the bond bank, and the bond bank sends us invoices twice a year.
Yeah. I
But
don't know
how,
who gets
I
the
mean,
2%.
if it's a revolving loan fund that the state has, then one would think that that's the state money. I guess thinking out loud, if we're gonna end up paying interest in that, I'd rather have it go to the bond bank than to go to the state for them to make money off of money that was given to them. And if that means that we have to seek to bond somewhere other than through the Clean Water Drinking Act, or
The whole reason that municipalities go through this program is there's often a very large amount of forgiveness because there's federal funds that come into the program.
and if that money
Okay.
has to be spent, and if they don't spend it, it's gonna go away, why wouldn't they dole it out to people who've asked for it?
So with the ERU, you have a certain number, Amy has another number.
We disagree, but,
Can't you ask them for documentation? I want documentation and, spreadsheet, whatever, that shows you how you come to that number. What
She
you
was
found.
higher than yours numbers.
Yeah,
Yeah, she was higher.
So what happens if it,
By almost 100.
Well, let's wrap up, not wrap up, by God means no. Let's talk about the ERU, first of all. I found that you said what it means. I didn't know, I wrote it down, what's ERU?
yeah.
Of course, you read the trailer park is one.
Yeah.
Correct? But there's
Because as
40
far as this water system is
Right.
concerned,
It's,
it's
But-
a connection.
but it used to be 44 connections over there, or 40 connections for the
Mhm.
trailers.
Mhm.
Here again, you read Lover's Lane Trailer Park,
With a,
Woodlands
Woodland.
as one, and there's
Yes.
36 units down there. Take those together, I'm coming up around 79 more than one. We call it as one or two, we read 2 meters, but they're calling it 79 more residents uses. Is that a factor? Could we say one of
That's
the,
what she did.
I believe it is.
She already tried that.
okay, you did that,
And I
okay.
believe that they worked with these consecutive systems to talk us into taking over their water testing and exempting them, and turned it into something far more reaching than we thought it was going to be. I was like, okay, great, you're just gonna use my operator's license, and I'm gonna also run your water system from a licensing perspective.
And water
Cool,
testing.
you got an out.
And then the second one,
Seems like a bit more.
Pine Street didn't qualify because we were,
Too efficient.
too
We were
efficient.
too efficient.
20 odd thousand, I heard $20,000-$30,000 more than we would have been. I don't know what it
I
is,
think it
whatever.
might have been far more than that, based on
But
the
it-
fact that it appears, I reread her paragraph that she sent to Valerie
Yeah,
on
I
how
saw
they
that.
go from what I call, worst case scenario, next best, there's 5 layers. They ratchet within the 5 layers, so it takes like a pretty big amount of debt to get them to do the 50% grant.
Valerie wrote back that, you know, Jill being the operator, being on site doing
Right,
others thing, we asked for that to be put in.
yeah.
And did we get an answer on that?
This is not eligible. We would have had to build it into the construction project as a cost that would have been a fixed cost on the bid form. We would have had to say, you know,
We would have had to contracted V-Tums for so much money.
yeah, it
in
would
the
have had to be on
project.
the bid form and in the design for review by the state.
And also she said that amount alone would not have been enough to.
It wouldn't
trigger the
have
next-
trained us into where we thought we were gonna be. I guess this one here, I'm not over it yet, and I'm sure you guys aren't either, but I'm even more worried about how do we do another 19 of these? Like, how do we do the other 9.5 miles with a system that really only has 640 ratepayers? You know, like, how do you levy $12 million worth of cost on just that many people? So if I just do the rough math, and no, I'm not trying to hurt anybody's feelings or say I think this is right, but it would triple water rates to finish just these projects, and that's with no grants, no loan forgiveness. That feels pretty awful.
Can I, when we signed up for this, was that information that she gave us in that email, was that in the documents anywhere? Was
Not that I
that somewhere that we
know
could have gotten to it and
What
that
she
we should have
keeps
known?
pointing to is the back of the intended use plan and it pointing to another document with a bunch of small print wherein they, in hard to read language, explain this level process at the back of the plan. I've worked for engineering firms for most of my professional life. I never saw that utilized that way, ever. Usually when a program comes out with a particular forgiveness level, it's spread across the program. I was unaware that there was gonna be 5 layers of ratcheting, and then within that, still more layers. I just,
Yeah, I mean, when I read her email, I thought, or her explanation, I thought, man, we were way off. I mean,
We
I
would've
thought we
needed
were
to
way
do a
off on
couple-
numbers in order to get that 50%.
we would have needed to do a couple miles.
Yeah.
So it's like, I don't know if we wanna keep going into this and figure out maybe
Is,
lesson learned is like, what size project do you need to do? Because if you do too big of a project, they say that's too big. We
And they-
can't lend you that much money.
They need to provide you with the calculations.
That's what I want. I wanna say,
Can-
what's the sweet spot?
But it sounds like they could change the calculations at any point. How can you
Every single
trust
year,
this?
every
this-
single year, they can choose how they wanna do their intended use plan and how they wanna calculate that pot of money.
So every time we could apply for it, we could get screwed. We have no idea.
Which is
Whether
crazy,
you get
because
it.
you have to
We're batting 1,000.
you have to take the risk to
Yeah.
get the reward. And
can we, kind of like they do in the banking industry, can we get so-called, if we'd have put that, what Steve and all them gathered here, those 8, 10 contractors, Steve come back with a plan for Munson, this is what it's gonna cost us, because we had said before we start, here's the cost, state of Vermont, what's our forgiveness? They'd have said, given us this calculation now and said, you don't get any, then we might,
Took them a year and a half to
I
calculate
get that
it as
figure,
it
I get
was,
that,
so,
yeah.
I'm pretty
We
good at
still wouldn't be
numbers.
started the project.
we still wouldn't be starting a
I'm
project.
pretty good at numbers. We know what our median household income is for that loan year. We should be able to back that number in and say, that's the number you're aiming for. I would like the spreadsheet. I'd like to own it. I'd like to have a copy of it. If it's public funding, I'd like
It's
to,
gotta be public
I'd
information.
like to be able to back the number
We
into
do
this
public
spreadsheet.
information.
And then-
request.
You did request a copy.
I have a screenshot.
Right.
I don't know if I can build her.
And so my next question would be, could we do now,
We need to wrap this up to get on to the next. So we need to make a decision.
Yeah.
well, I can't make a decision
I
without
don't
it.
think we can.
Well, then we table it until next time.
Is, do we, what if we done, Steve comes back in 2 more years and we're gonna do 3 streets? And then we say, you know what? I suggested it at one time, my bank said, maybe we'd be better off, instead of having these 19 bonds out there for the next 10 years. Or next 40 years,
30 years.
30 or 40 years, we're gonna have 19 different bonds. We do 2 or 3 projects with a bank loan.
Well, that's our goal is to just do two or
And
three.
then
The rest
say,
of the
we've got
west, the
3
east, and
projects done,
Rockdale.
now can we wanna wrap them up,
Roll it into.
roll it into a bond? Can, I guess I would have to, Amy, it says, is that even doable? Oh, no, they're done and paid for, and you've got financing for them, construction financing we got.
It's just, you're gonna get like 5 or 6% interest at the bank, and the loan program at 2% is still more affordable. Accruing interest is painful.
Right, but right now we're getting 0%. We've got a $900,000 bill we gotta pay.
Yeah.
Over 30, 40 years.
Yeah.
If we get, how many said, you said 19 or?
So basically, if you
19 more
have the
projects?
ability to fund, if you can be your own bank and you can fund $2 million a year for the next 5 years, yes, you can self-fund. I don't think they'll
No, I
do,
didn't mean it that way. I meant, we borrow $2 million and we pay interest, we pay on the interest only. It's a little higher rate there, don't know.
oh, you're talking about.
And then when
that
you get
reverse
2 or 3
mortgage
projects
thing.
done, okay, now we want a bond. And now we've got $5 million project done. There were 3
But you're
separate
taking a
projects.
risk of them declining you,
Yeah,
Yeah, you are.
saying it's too much money.
or you've already financed it.
I'd like to be an umpire for that group. They change the rules every game.
Mhm.
But do we think that it might be worthwhile speaking to the governor's office? I mean, he picked this infrastructure investment as a big priority to move their ARPA funding in, and they have certain goals. Now, the bureaucrats will enforce those based on whatever rule documents they're given, but the governor has a specific objective that he wants, and it's not this. Like, this was not what he envisioned for this program. So he's their boss. I mean, all of these agencies report to the executive branch. So would it be worthwhile just reaching out to his office and letting him know what happened and saying, we don't think that they've done anything wrong, they're doing their job. However, we can all recognize that the process has resulted in this bad outcome that you didn't want. You don't want local water districts to be indebted and not be able to finish their projects.
And it's a misrepresentation, I think.
Right, and so can we fix this? Like, clearly, we've identified some sort of a problem with the process. You know, can we fix it for this year and then fix the paperwork moving forward?
That's a little bit of the direction that I was
Right.
suggesting. By
A
saying
softer letter.
that,
so-called.
well, that outlining our experience, our disappointment, our expectations and the outcomes and our observations and our recommendations for either going forward or, hey, can you help fix this? Kind of
I
thing.
mean, even if they just waive the interest,
That's $250,000.
Well, apparently there's no mechanism. They have to, it doesn't check the box.
yeah, well, there's a lot of things,
That's an
there's a
extra
lot of
thing.
things that don't check
So
the
I think we
box
could-
that happen.
At least, what Jessica was saying, maybe not a harsh letter to but a letter saying, how do we know when we qualify and when the goals keep changing?
Well, that's.
If
what-
we tell them our
Goalposts keep changing in the
experience,
game.
Right, I mean, that's part of it, but also too, and your note here, Val, you're talking about, you know, when we applied for it in June 22, it was supposed to be 0% interest, 0% admin fee, and deferred for 5 years, and now that's all changed.
Yeah, it's
So-
wrapped into the construction loan at 2% over 30 years.
Right, so why did that change? Why was it supposed to be that?
Well, because it took
And
them too
Amy's
long.
response was, it's now required to be wrapped into the loan, the construction loan. And even if they had issued the loan, the step 2 loan a year ago, when we applied, it would have gotten canceled out and rolled into the
They always
construction.
roll step 1, 2, and 3 into one project and then throw it to the bond bank. That's just how they do it.
Well, then why do they offer that?
And
I just, it's
To
like,
get
why would you?
to get you to move ahead with the project, they're like, it's okay, go ahead, do the design, and we'll give you 0.
Well, that's
They're trying to get
temptation and
you-
fraud.
I mean, Steve and I think Eric, and somebody, maybe Jill and that guy from the state, we were on the town bar one day. Goes, yeah, listen, we walked that whole night during the bidding. Remember, we had all the contractors.
Mhm.
Goes, oh, that's a great project. You guys are gonna qualify for this, no problem.
See,
And
well, we qualify. for
I should have
funding.
got his name.
We qualify for funding, we just don't qualify for loan forgiveness. I would like to know where the ARPA money is going as a taxpayer.
Okay.
Where's it going? If it's supposed to be funding infrastructure, is it just going to the bigger projects? Is it going to the less responsible municipalities? Is that?
Yeah,
facilities that have
I
more
just,
people.
I think we should maybe do a softer letter, but say, you know, why are we being penalized for having a good project coming in under budget and, you know, trying to save money?
Right,
Well, I'm doing things like one bite at a time,
right.
that we knew we
We
could.
And
could've
also
done a lot
the
more
goals,
streets.
like our goals and the governor's goals are the same goals, right? So why should the rules prevent us all from getting to the same thing we all want?
And
Steve,
it-
I'm
And
gonna-
also, this is just the beginning of this project.
Right, and I
It's
think
not like
that's
we
gotta
wrap
be
thing up and
told.
it's great, we've solved our problem with our water
And we got
district.
5 grants before, and
just
this one we
begun.
didn't get.
No,
Steve, you got anything? I read your comment here, Steve, and you know, you poked that bear, you come over there, we went over your head and we're going.
We kind of did go over it already, you know, we went, when we went to Senator Ray, he had a meeting with the Secretary of the Agency of Natural Resources, which you're one step below the governor's office. And they obviously, you know, that's 4 steps over Andy said already. And by the way, he chairs Natural Resources, which means he's the one that approves all the funding for the agency. So they don't want to upset him no matter what. Probably even more so than the governor. And they turned him down too. So, you know, as I said to these guys, at some level, the 3 of us have to be on a working level with Amy on a regular basis. And I feel like we went up to that 3 times. I think it's actually 4 now.
Almost
And we
5.
struck
Yes.
out, you know what I mean? Every single time, whether it was a political avenue we went
Is your
on,
strike zone getting?
or whether it was technical or whatever merits we tried to push, you know what I mean? They just flat out put their hand up and said, no, 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 no. And I'm just, you know, I'm here advocating, believe me, there's no one here more disappointed than I am in this whole thing.
I just
But I
see this happening, how do we tell the voters, all we wanna do is Spring, Elm and this, or those streets in 2 more years, then we wanna do those in 3 more years, or 5 more years. Say, wait a minute, you guys keep telling
You
us.
did this to us on West Street. Now you
Yeah, you
did it
did
to
this
us
on
on
Pine,
Pine
and
Street.
why do we believe you, Joel and Baker? Why do we believe you? Because we're gonna be, you know, the 5 of us, and with Val, we're gonna say, why should we believe you more? And,
Yeah.
But if we can't, you know, if we can't even get the answers as to why, we just get, you didn't qualify. I mean, I think we ought to at least be able to get an explanation.
Amy's threads did It provide does tell you extra- why we, yeah, Amy's
The
email is
calculate the
very
metrics.
complicated, but it does tell you why we didn't qualify.
so I guess I'd like to ask for the ERU calculation, how it was calculated. And I'd like to also ask to be provided the spreadsheet for each year's funding, so that we can back the number in and make the right size project.
Mhm.
I mean,
That seems to be
it's
the important.
public
thing, it's not just
information.
counting the ERUs.
Mhm.
That's the big
Yeah.
thing.
It's no different than when we were trying to get money to close the landfill. We went up there and we went a half a dozen different routes and we finally ended up going to the legislature to get the money.
Right.
You know,
At
and,
first glance, they said, no, we spent it all.
Yeah.
We said, no, you spent ours.
but they, even with that, they told us we could have 200,000 and I think we only ended up with 178 because they took there again, we were frugal, we got a good bid, we got our number down and so then they took the money we
Money away from
had and said, you know, wait a minute, you don't need the whole 200,000 because you did it cheaper.
That's when we got that almost for free from Omnia.
Yeah.
Trucking it, we had.
I
paid
guess,
trucking back.
I guess for future projects, is this the only direction that we can take, is working with this agency?
Not unless we have the money in our little coffers to pay
I
for it.
think another program is called US Rural Development, and there's also Northern Borders Grant. And I don't even know what the name of the new program that's basically earmarks. Do you remember?
Federal- Yeah, it's the federal directed spending.
Yeah, so I was asking Valerie, like, how
They take a
else
long
can we
time,
go
though,
about this to
Once
get more
to
money?
apply before you get a final answer, and a very complicated application process.
Right.
Kevin,
Hmm.
you've been sitting and gathering all this information. I saw you make some notes.
He's trying to stay quiet.
What do you think? Poke the bear or not?
I'd like to know how the ERU is calculated. They can't hide the ball in the information. I don't think we've got enough information to figure out whether we can poke the bear.
Just to let you know, I've been drafting this letter for a while, and one of the paragraphs deals with the subject that when the water district agreed to accept the Woodland Apartments and Kilbourne Trailer Park as exempt executive water systems, we were not aware that action would affect how the system's ERUs are calculated, since the number of connections did not actually change. However, we were surprised to learn that the higher ERU number of 695 versus what we believe to be 633 contributed toward the project not being eligible for the forgiveness due to its effect on the user rate calculation. And Jill had calculated that just for this new $34,000 annual loan repayment, would require a 40% increase in user rates. And so I put in that ironically, those two communities will be the hardest hit by the increases the water rates will need to meet the new loan payments.
They only make one payment, right?
But still 40%.
Right, no, but I'm just saying, we
They'll
don't
be-
get a payment from every
No.
individual, we get one payment because we have the meter pits.
Correct,
But
but
then
then
the
that
lowest
gets
income
levied on all
right.
of the renters inside of
The
their.
renters, it's all part of their rent, their water use.
But that's, I mean, that's what she's pointing to, that these multi-unit residential connections. So that's the problem, is more so.
But
than
they're
the
also
How do
the
you-
the lowest income.
How do the
communities.
firehouse apartments work? They the same way, or do they each individually have a?
They've never shared with me how they're doing their ERU
No,
calculation.
she
No.
wants to know.
For
Right.
firehouse apartments, how do
You
you
read each
bill
one?
them?
There's 3 connections.
Free connection, so,
Each connection in our town right now is generally a line with a meter. A line with a meter, a line with a meter.
mm,
What this number is, I don't know if it's an engineering calculation, I don't know if they're looking at the water permit application to the state, I don't know how they call it an equivalent residential unit. If I even just took, okay, oh wait, I did another calculation for them, remember I did 2. The second one I did, I took our water consumption, which was the amount of consumption over the quarter. I annualized it. And then I took their annual calculation for 1 ERU, which was like 75,000 gallons, backed it in, and it was even lower. It was like 400 and something. Remember? I was like, I'd like the 4, but I'll take the 633. And they were like, ha, 695.
Because the consumption remains the consumption. It's not like it's a single connection that goes to 40 people and it's a hidden thing and they're only paying for one person to use the water. The amount of water is the amount of water, regardless of how many people are using it.
Well, if
So
the
how can you-
consumption can be a way to calculate an ERU,
Right,
our
shouldn't-
consumption is like 433.
Right, shouldn't
It's
it be
like
the
four-
consumption?
But-
Because that's
No,
the
'cause
Well,
whole.
it's no,
They're saying it's this data from this one specific type of regulatory record, and it says that for each multi-unit residential building, like an 8-unit apartment counts as 8 total ERUs. So that means
That's
that
the
every
multi-units
single,
that are getting
it's the
us.
multi-units that are causing the problem.
Right.
it's no different than when they do septic calculations. They figure them at
That's what they're
400,
taking it
Right.
from.
450
Exactly.
150
gallons of
per,
water. and
for
per-
the first 3
per- yeah.
bedrooms.
So I mean, maybe that would be an angle for us to exploit, would be that these multi-unit apartment buildings were added in later, and that they're primarily where low-income residents are living, and so they would bear the majority of this cost.
Ooh, disproportionately affected.
Exactly,
Them,
other
especially
angle I
the
want-
trailer park, the 40
right.
users in the
The
trailer
other
park.
angle I want to show, and I haven't quite gotten there yet, is the bond bank asked for the highest volume, the highest paying ratepayers, the highest customers. And we came up with the 5. One of them was the school, one of them was
How does it,
maybe.
how does the school calculate into that? They're just one?
Tell me, I don't know.
They can
I
just be
don't know.
one, it's done by units.
So well, in this
I don't
instance,
know.
they were just, the bond bank was just looking for the dollar amount that they pay, I mean, the highest paying.
Right,
water
so it's our
bills.
obviously
And
by
so what I
volume.
want to show too, with these, a 40% increase in rate, either for just this loan and then subsequent loans, I want to be able to show what the actual dollar impact might be on those large users and how the economic impact that's going to have on the
And
community.
that's, the schools are taxpayer money too.
Exactly, so, and
And
the
all the
businesses,
municipal
so I think the
buildings,
Bobcat was
yeah.
another one. So
Yeah.
if their water rates go up astronomically, how's that going to affect their viability as a business in Bristol?
Just means the
They're
burger's
just
be
gonna pass it
35%.
Or leave?
Well, a business can to a certain extent pass it on,
Well,
a school can't, that's
Right,
taxes.
And I think part of this is also, we have a lot of 1905 still in the ground pipes that and this calculation of yours is jeopardizing whether we're gonna continue to go forward and to improve our system.
we don't have a choice, do we?
We are well beyond the useful life on those 1905s.
Well,
We're
City
beyond,
relatives
it.
too,
we're
they got
beyond the
stuck in there.
usable life, but what,
We
are
need
they
it
saying
better.
we have to
I
change
thought
it?
they told them, I thought we had to, simply we had to replace them all.
I don't think we have been issued any kind of directive in a permitting authority type of way.
I guess part of the letter could say that due to uncertainty of your bonding or your forgiveness, our uncertainty of continue to improving our system, getting all of our old 1905, whether they're lead or not, I don't know. I don't
They're
think so.
lead, they're all lead packed.
You know, lead packed
All the cast iron is.
and cast iron and lead packed, that this jeopardizes greatly
And then
because.
we
it's gonna-
ask, can we use the lead funding? There's a separate pocket of money for lead funding, and they say, oh, it's just for the line, it's not for the joints.
Yeah.
Because somehow the joint is less.
Water slips by
contaminated.
that without touching
It
it.
slips by that joint and doesn't touch the lead, but it touches the lead up, yeah, that's the thought process, it's been convoluted. Yeah, there are other funding sources that I think maybe we should look into, because there's so much.
Well, I think we
real work
gotta,
That's left to get done, and there's a question of, how does this program actually really work? And what is the funding for the future of the projects that we need to do?
Right.
Because if we can't get some type of commitment from them that it truly has loan forgiveness, it's too big a bite.
Where we've paid Munson?
Oh, yes.
Okay, so we have, right now, all we have is a tax anticipation note out, or do we even have that?
No, that's still out. It's due at the end of, it's due back in,
How much is out?
I think, about $200 and something thousand.
So
For the.
we're, I guess where I'm going is we're solvent enough to take a little bit of time and try to figure this out.
Yes.
I mean, the interest on 200,000 is a lot less than it is on 750,000.
Mhm.
but I do think, Peter, you make a good point, is if we don't solve it and they say no, and it's due March of, we have to set our new water rates possibly in June meeting
Oh, yeah,
to reflect starting a payment of 35,000 a month. a year,
yeah, because it's in March of,
Because
the
it's
next
the year
water.
be.
And if I was a water user, I would be extremely upset
Mhm.
because, you know, this is just like we told them with West Street and you remember the conversation, don't you, Steve, when you brought that up?
so I'm just
So
gonna,
I'm gonna let, Kevin, what do you think, Kevin? Listening.
So the ERU calculation's gotta be someplace in a regulation, can't be.
Mhm, it's section
Okay.
4 of GD 13, whatever that means.
Well, so if we had our 633 number, where would we have qualified on the tiering of forgiveness?
I don't know, she didn't recalculate it for me, she was unwilling to change the number and to let me know.
Because the total ERU shall not be less than the data from the sanitation regulatory record. They have to use 695. So
Okay.
that looks like the way it's written.
Mhm.
I wonder if the sanitation record is correct.
Well, it would stand, that would be issued on septic permits, right? But that would be, that's all based on bedrooms and not,
And not everybody in town has a permit, I mean, because some of them were
well, a lot of the stuff in the village is still cesspools.
right.
If we
Mine
want,
isn't permitted.
if we want
New system.
if we wanna get information that Amy doesn't wanna give us, every agency now is required to have on the website who the contact person is for public record requests. So is this A&R that we're dealing with?
Yes.
It is.
All right, so there's on the website, there's an A&R person who gets the public record request. And that's his or her sole job, as far as I can tell, and they're on a pretty short timeframe based on the statutes. They have to give us the information. If we, the better we can target it.
Kelly Hughes is the records officer.
All right, so, and then, it's kind of, I don't know if Amy finds out even, I mean, Kelly goes and gathers what she needs to gather. And, or he, and then, they're supposed to respond in days, or tell you, well, we can't do that in days. So it'll take a little longer. The statute's very strict.
Mhm.
can I say that you actually get the documents as quickly as you're supposed to? No, and.
You have to
sometimes
do it
get a
within 3
runaround.
days, and if you can't, then you have to provide notice of why you can't and what period of time you expect to be able to provide it.
I
And
went,
if there's any cost
I
over
went
30
through a
minutes.
merry-go-round with the Division of Fire Safety in the late fall, where they kicked me to the central office, and they kicked me to the AG, and it just kept going, and the AG sent me back to the first place and just went round and round for a while. And then I got to the deputy director or something, and things finally moved, but some of that was due to personnel turnover, but it's a better system now, because you're going to a person who's the central clearinghouse and they gather up the stuff, so you can even get the emails. You know, it's all public record. There's lots of exemptions in the law, but there shouldn't be any exemption here, or if there is an exemption, they have to cite it to you.
So,
But, I mean, I don't. If we had more information, I think we could decide whether we could.
poke the bear more or not poke, or at
Yeah,
least send it.
or just say, if there was a mistake someplace, how do we even know that 695 is actually correctly calculated? We don't know what the
How they're doing.
Yeah, they can't make it up differently year by year. I get that funding is there year by year, it changes, but if it's an equivalent residential unit calculation, there's gotta be a regulation that tells everybody how to count that.
There is in the application. So in the funding application, the ERUs are calculated by, it's equivalent residential units. You take all residential units in town. And added to that, they add all of the commercial usage. So in your case, you've got, I don't remember how many commercial users in town, but it goes to school and everybody else. And they divide by a standard number. Jill, correct me if I'm wrong, I think it's 77,000 gallons.
It's somewhere around 75-ish, yep.
Yeah, okay. Don't quote me on a number, it's 77,000. So they take your total of all your commercial users, they divide by 77,000, and that part is an equivalent residential. They add the two together, and that's your ERU number. That number in the application that we put together, I believe the total usage was put together by the director of finance, and we'll know that at the time. And we just did the calculations, you and I did the calculations for them, I believe, my memory. So it's not a complicated calculation. We would just have to go through, and somebody would need to double check all of the figures probably from the commercial units. And then we would still have the issue that Jill brought up, which is if the state's going to count the residential units on these projects that have their own water permits, operating permits, we would need to know that. You know, if there's 20 units and they have their own individual water operating permit. And they're responsible for their own maintenance costs, and they're responsible for everything else. To me, that would seem like it should not be counted as part of your ERUs, because this is purely about maintenance. And the other thing that I would offer, you guys are talking about moving forward, I think we all learned a lot going through this process in terms of how the state handles this. When we fly next time and Valerie receives, you folks receive a letter saying that you are eligible for the money, I think at that point, we should set forward and say, okay, our estimates for construction are this, based on that.
Where do we stand?
Exactly. Are we going to be
Tell us
eligible
now.
for loan forgiveness based on this information and get it right?
If it's in writing. say-
But it took them a year, it took
Yeah, I
them a
know.
year and a half after we finished the project to tell us we didn't qualify, so. Yeah.
Maybe we'll pick up the phone.
Now Valerie's turning on her keyboard and sending emails.
So you guys have heard a lot tonight. We've heard from Kevin. What do we want to do? Do we want to at least have,
I say we at least express our concerns to the governor.
Yes, I agree.
do we want to, what Kevin was saying about getting some data, some right data, and say, we challenge your findings in the data?
Well, I think if Jill wants the information, then we need to reach out and get it. I mean, it's the only way we're gonna know going forward. It's the
Does
only
it
way
come from a
we're gonna.
letterhead from a lawyer's office, or does it come from, we done through our office? I'm just asking.
Anybody can make that request,
Yeah,
right?
Freedom of
Going through Kelly,
information.
there's no magic form or
Mhm.
magic language. Anybody whether you're a Vermonter or not, so anybody from the town can.
I will reach out to Amy first and ask her directly for it, and if that does not work, then we'll go the other routes.
Yeah, or I'm happy
And now
to
you
do
know
it.
what
No,
it's
no,
like.
no, take care of
I,
it.
no, I wasn't trying to, I just bringing that to the board. Okay, so what do we want to leave that? Valerie, you'll come back with us and, it's April 15th by May 15th.
Well, I
Or
would
2
say,
weeks?
I would say.
2 weeks?
Yeah.
Next week is board meeting, so I don't think she'll have
Maybe
something.
3 weeks.
Well, if I do,
It's
then
true.
I can.
If you do, you do,
Yeah,
but it'd be
yeah.
great, but,
And I'd like to run it by the team.
right.
first and see, yeah.
So is that good for everybody?
The sooner the better.
Sooner the better.
Absolutely.
I mean, we need to resolve it, and we can only set on that money for so long before it starts costing us more than if we end up having to borrow more to meet our obligations,
No, I
then.
think we're good. I think we're in good shape, especially with taxes coming in and we've gotten a lot of other grant reimbursements lately. So I think we're cash flow wise, we're doing okay.
Okay.
At some point, though, that cash flow will stop. That cash cow won't be there.
Okay. All right, so we don't need to vote on that or anything, just
Stay tuned.
stay tuned. Okay, number 2, consider adoption of water line design and construction policies and standards for water lines and abutments outside of the public right of way.
Well, obviously, there was no draft document available to be reviewed because there were so many different inputs of documents to poke through that nothing specific came together, but I think a lot of the folks in this room have some specific ideas that we can talk about that can then get translated into a document. Some point.
Well, I would like to see, like, to get our operators out of the middle of trying to decide something with a builder or construction excavator on the side of the street. You know, where they have to say, they could just say, no, here's from the engineer, here's what you got to put up to the specs. That's what because I think of School Street over there. You know, we went back and forth last year and a couple other things that if we had everything from the engineer in writing, that here's our policy, and if it's,
Well, we as water commissioners should just have to bless it when it gets here. We shouldn't be sitting here saying, I think it should be plastic, I think it should be copper, it should be spelled out. I mean, we've done, and that's part of the reason I asked to do this, because we did Devon Lane. We sat here and we hashed that one out. And then we did, there was another one we did.
Dawson Lane.
Yes. And we sat here and we hashed that one out. Whereas if we had a policy where it just, and there's more of this coming. And I think before, we've got Thomas's, we've got my parents' project, we've got your project. And right now, every time somebody comes before us, we sit here and it's kind of embarrassing to sit in front of a customer, for lack of a better term, but somebody who wants water is a customer. And we not know what our own rules are.
And it's not in the zoning or planning, it's not
it's
written down
underwater,
anywhere.
so.
We have some guidelines, but we also allow for exceptions, and I think we need to have it so that the exceptions don't have to come to us, if it, or the rules are such that they're easy to interpret. Because right now, these, both Thomas's project and my parents' project are out of the, the connections could conceivably be out of the right of way of the road.
Mhm.
And so so we need language. We either need language that allows us to access those curb boxes wherever they are and read those meters wherever they are. The other thing that Jill brought up when I spoke with her was that, they spend a lot of time looking for curb boxes. And in this day and age, the equipment is there. When those curb boxes go in, we should have a GPS coordinate. And yeah, we may have to spend some money to get the instrument to be able to do it. But from talking to Steve and Kevin LaRose and Jason Barnard, they said, plug that number in, you go, you set that down, and that's where it is, there's no looking. And I think every time we did West Street, we did Pine Street, all of those should be documented, so that if Jill gets a call, I need to know where my water service is. She pulls the coordinates, goes out, and boom, there's none of this, now it's like, look at the picture and look at
Trying to douse for where the line is, looking for the dot on the paper.
and in this day and age, if we're putting in new stuff, we shouldn't have to do that.
Well, what about, water lines on private driveways?
I personally, I think that that's an easement thing. I think, if you have an easement, however it's drafted, I don't know.
I mean, that would have been so much better for Adam if we allowed that and we owned it and got an easement from him. Because then you'd have put the water line down there, we own it to the water stop, to the.
Well, we don't even have to own it to the water stop. If it's going to that property, it could be set up so that it's the responsibility of whoever owns that at the time, if there's a problem, to take care of it. I see. Huh?
He said, what happens if they don't?
Well, if they don't, if it's in the policy and they don't, you can shut it off.
So the worry is that if you shut it off and it's 6 homes, you're shutting off 6 people. And it might be one of the 6 that doesn't wish to comply or doesn't wish to do the repair, and therefore the group can't afford to do it because they don't have consensus. So it's like.
So you shut that one off and you let the other.
I'm very
Just
much
fight it
I'm
out.
very much in support of individual curbs.
Mhm.
I just wanna understand how.
I think, well, my other thought, and here again, I'll use my parents as an example. There's gonna be 7 connections there. If you don't have, if you form a water association, they're willing to do whatever you decide you want them to do. But if you form an association, and like Jill says, you got the one that doesn't want to pay, how does the town deal with that at that point? Whereas if they were individual meters with easements, then, you shut that one off. And
Is the only reason we're not doing individual meters cost for projects like this, multi-house developments?
the reason that I see that we're not doing meters right now is Jill's concerned about being out of the right of way and not being able to access it.
Well, there still would be individual meters at the residences to be read for the water bills themselves, but we're talking about a meter
You
pit.
know what, though?
In the right of way.
For the previous development, we had said, we'll just read at the pit, we'll read at the pit. But
And then it's their
begging the
responsibility.
question, which was raised by Joel, and it's even that like longevity of things selling and transferring ownership and becoming separate.
Mhm.
If there isn't to each building that has a service, a way to have a customer relationship, a way to turn it on, a way to turn it off, even though it's outside, there is still that worry that it's just, it's not constructed
I
correctly.
think we have to stop looking at it like, like Adam, he said, well, they're just gonna be rentals and I'm gonna own them. Like, okay.
Right
You gotta
now.
stop looking at that because eventually
Yeah.
he's not gonna own them.
Yeah.
We have to look at them like
I think
each
you need- I
person
think
might
you
have
need-
a water.
Yeah, I think you need everything individualized.
Right.
I'd
That's
like,
the, that's the only way that we can manage stuff, because we're not gonna do a situation where we shut off 6 people because of one.
Right,
It's not gonna happen.
I personally would like to see,
You at the back.
So Joel and I went over this just recently. The reason why I think a meter pit is a good idea is because if in those 7 you have a problem and you have to figure out which one is that problem, your meter pit, your main meter right there, that's a troubleshooting device to where, okay, right now we've got water spinning. Let's shut that one off. We shut that one off, the water starts spinning. Oh, that one's not it. This one is it. So you can actually individualize.
You can troubleshoot.
And troubleshoot instead of, I don't know.
Especially
But
for
like-
what we call kind of like these long stretches that are not distribution mains, but they're like
Well, like the
multi
North Meadow,
service.
drive, my brother's old place.
Yes,
where it's gonna go
There's
down.
300 feet off the road, there's two curb stops down there.
we know.
Yep.
Yeah,
And right
to me,
now-
I would, first of all, I'd like to see a policy where if you're agree to buy water from the town of Bristol Water Department, then we have the right to walk on your property to service your curb stop or disconnect it, shut it off for lack of payment.
That, I believe it already
does,
exists,
yeah.
okay?
Okay, just like
I
Green
don't
Mountain
think
Power,
that it
there's a meter on
doesn't
my side of
exist.
the house.
I think
I
we
can't put a
just
no trespassing
have to
sign,
be-
hold on. And they can't, they can't, I say, well, I put no trespassing sign, now you can't read my meter.
Yeah, but that doesn't work.
I know it doesn't
Yeah,
work,
it doesn't.
but I would like to see that first of all, if we don't have a policy. If you're buying water from us, then we have the right to walk on your property for service at curb stop, like Si did the other day, we found a stone in that one that's half open,
Mhm.
or for lack of payment.
And at the very least, we should update the application form to include that statement on there, so that when they sign it and submit it, it's right there that that's what they're agreeing
Well,
to.
we've got a right to inspect in our ordinance.
Right.
Yeah,
And the next thing I would like to see is 1 meter, 1 shut off. Whether it's a curb stop or not, we could talk about that.
Mhm.
But I think, like I said with Adam's place, or the 7 you say with, I don't mind a meter pit. But if 7 of those is in the development, I haven't paid my water meter in years. And you shut one off, they shut all 7 off.
Yeah, I don't
Up
wanna-
by
I
that
don't
house,
wanna
by
have
that
to-
meter, there should be a quarter turn valve on there, where you can put a chain and a thing on it, and if they steal the water, then it's set the services.
Yeah, and by this exercise over the past week, I did read what was sent over from Virgin's Panton, I read the
Yeah.
CWB. And it just, what I saw in their language was a lot of organized wording that was very clear about how decisions were being made, and that this was a utility service that was being purchased, that you were a customer and you were signing that you wanted a water connection, that you wanted this utility and you wanted this service, and it came with terms.
Right.
Right, and what I'm not seeing necessarily that being carried through 100% in all different ways. And I'm also seeing that it's just, right now, we're dealing with also your right of ways.
Mhm.
And where the town stops and the customer starts. It's just that delineation so that the water maps show, okay, the town owns to here. It's a consistent, and then you need easements for anything that fits, that's outside of, but you need shut offs in the right of way.
So I have a
I
question on that.
gave Val an example today that drafted for town Rutland years ago, where it's automatic. There was a permit needed, and as part of the permit grant, they gave an easement to the town, and the town could own, the actual infrastructure became accepted and owned by the town, so the town could do whatever needed to be done, and we had an easement on 10 feet on either side of the installed line. So that part's pretty easy to solve. You gotta then decide, where does town ownership and responsibility end, and where does homeowner?
I feel like it needs to be in the right of way of the public road, of the public roads and the public water lines.
But we have these private driveways now, private roadways now, like, is it Joy Drive, J Drive, and so you gotta, when it goes down those roads, you wanna still have it be owned by the town until it splits off to the houses.
And to complicate things,
That's gonna be a really expensive upkeep
Pre-existing.
50 years from now.
pre-existing situations like Francis Place, that's private drive, water main down there, right? Is that a water main?
It's a 6-inch.
It's a private line, it happens to be 6 inch, and it happens to have a hydrant on it, per the requirement of that water connection being granted by the commission at the time.
Private hydrant.
I've never heard of such a thing, to be honest with you, but on a
Yes.
public water system,
Yeah, that's something, well, I see it in other towns' regulations or municipality regulations that sometimes the municipality actually requires it, but it's private.
so
And
my
I-
question is, if somebody slams that hydrant and
That's,
they break a 3-mile segment of water lines because they go whoop and then slam that thing shut. Why is somebody that doesn't have training on how to run a water system and how to open hydrants own a hydrant? that's just me feeling protective of the system and seeing what's happened in some other municipalities.
Well, it happened in Middlebury, it cost them hundreds of thousands of
They're
dollars.
still paying.
They're still paying for it. Somebody didn't shut one down that froze up overnight or froze up during
They
the
shut
winter,
it off and didn't pump it.
didn't pump it out.
So
That's why those
Our-
tags are on the hydrants.
our
now.
ordinance is a 16-page document.
Yeah.
How much of that are we looking at updating, changing, revising? Are we looking at the entire thing? Are we adding in some of the things that you spoke about this evening? Or something in between those two things?
Well, I think the ability to, locate the curb boxes is something that
With a
we should
GPS.
pursue as a
Oh,
department. It has
absolutely.
absolutely nothing to do with, I
And
mean, that's a,
That's not an ordinance thing.
No, but it needs to be, that
but
information
that,
needs to
that's
be
something,
something.
that
And so
information,
it
yes,
should be-
so we need to ask for that information when it goes in, whether we send somebody out and actually get that information when the curb stop's put in,
Mm.
or,
Okay.
but we need that, and we need that documentation so that
Okay.
when,
so
when
That's water
whoever our water
policy.
operator gets called is, they can go, this house, this is the coordinates, boom, there it is.
Well, the water operator is supposed to witness the installation, so at that moment, they can do
Yeah.
that reading at the same time.
Supposed to.
We're by,
Well, you're not supposed to be able to turn it on. You're not supposed to
yeah.
turn it on
If
and
you
off.
read the water supply rule, so our licenses and your water system is regulated by the Vermont Water Supply Rule and by the EPA. Safe Drinking Water Act amongst other regulations, so it's pretty strict about who's allowed to be touching certain things that can affect public health.
Right, but I'll go back to my first statement was, I would like to see some from the engineer, what's gotta be done, so you guys can just. Here, 802,
It's more than.
you wanna dig
engineering.
across here, here's our regulation, so you and Si don't have to sit there and go, oh, come on, we don't need to do it that.
Well, you say that, our water line was designed by an engineer. Adam Thomas's water line was designed by an engineer. The one on, Devon Lane was not.
Which,
The one that
The
does the
apartment.
apartment house and Lathrop's.
oh, yes, okay, that one.
So, I mean, if we required it be engineered,
I'm not
but
saying,
we've gotta have rules that they can follow.
right, the engineer's
Yeah.
gonna at least look at it, you know, they could submit it and say, Steve looks at it and goes, yeah, everything looks good to me. And he
I think,
stamps it.
However,
Or
it's,
doesn't, says, I,
however it's designed, I think it should be so that the water operator can exercise it. And then, you're concerned about paying for the line, I would say that's something where they'd have to have a homeowners association where if that line failed, and a good example of that is the 4-inch main that went up, that went from the Bouvier property up to,
Mount Lane. No,
George Menard's and Max Dumas's.
Yeah.
That was a private owned line. And that line was replaced by the people on that line years ago. And then the last time it was replaced, I think the town did it.
And then the town went
The
across my
cross-country
prayer.
line?
No, the
One all the way to the
the
right-
4-inch that went from, I think it's 6 now, isn't it? That went from Bouvier's up to,
The last
George
hydrant.
Hazel Drive.
To the blow off, just past Hazel Drive.
Is that still 4 or is that 6 now?
It's only a 4.
See, that was replaced,
The 70s.
If it was a private line, why did the town replace it?
the town didn't the first time.
No, I'm
And
talking
and
about
I
the
don't
second
know
time.
why we did it this, I
think it
don't know
was-
why we did this.
No,
You
the
just
the
set a
homeowners
precedent.
replaced it from, my parents were on Village Water, the next ones are up through. This goes way back when, before his father bought Pine Tree Gardens, his mom and dad. It used to be where Carl Shepherd's parents were, Roseman Shepherd's there. And it was all the way up to the rest, almost up to there, and they replaced it with 6-inch, and then they turned it over to the Village Water Department.
There's only 4-inch up through there when,
It was, and then I believe they turned it, when they did all the North Street, they went 6-inch up to there.
No, after flank is 4-inch.
and it's 6-inch to the loop.
6-inch to the loop.
Then the
my parents.
maps are wrong.
On the maps that I currently use every single day after Plank Road, that's 4-inch water line.
Did you do the tap for, his parents' property? Were you
Right
there
next
for
to
that?
us.
Was that 4 inch?
No,
I mean-
that was 6.
So
Yeah.
6 went up to that hydrant, went cross country over to Meadow Lane
Yeah.
and then back. So
Yeah,
it's
'cause
6
he
to
wanted to-
there.
And
I
after
wanted
that
to
is
tap on
four.
that.
After that,
structure
it's
in the
4,
side
yeah.
yard, And we said, no, you
So
need to
if
tap
you
in
want to
the
tap
right.
So
on
we're
the
getting-
other side to feed it.
That's fine.
Okay,
So you
please,
don't-
can we focus back?
Yeah,
on
let's
what we're
focus
supposed to be
back.
doing?
So my,
It's
is
just
I-
about it,
and I
about
bring
it.
a couple of examples, like the day that Chris Acker showed up on a Saturday and started digging up to Robert Fuller's.
Mhm.
And it calls you guys in the
You didn't even
ordinance.
call.
Oh, no.
No, you didn't call.
We
You
got
guys
him
drove
on the
by
way
and
in-
saw
We
it.
got him on the way into
You
town.
know,
I was
it's-
like,
it-
what are you doing?
And then they didn't, and one of the first line, they didn't put any tracer wire and he put plastic in.
Mhm.
I think, number one, we need to get tough and say, where's your excavator? Start digging that up. We gotta see it.
Mhm.
And I was the one that said, if you don't go copper, if you wanna go plastic, we're in a business to sell water. You can put it in you can put it in a 100-foot, rubber hose from Agway. I don't care as long as you read the meter
See, I
first.
have to care because with my license.
I know,
I'm
you get what I'm
responsible for
saying,
the
yes.
water quality.
But if you wanna run them plastic, it's gotta be in a meter pit. If you wanna run copper, it can be to the
So-
meter to the house.
I would say that with these lines like Thomas's,
Mhm.
my parents, I don't know what the design is on Joel's,
I don't
those
either.
runs aren't that long, but I would say that a meter pit at the road is the way to go, and then individual meters, and like you said, Si, if there's an issue and the numbers are way off, you can say, hey, we got a leak,
When
is
you
it the
say
main
meters, you mean
line?
curb stops?
Huh?
When you say meters, do you mean curb stops?
Both,
No.
you need curbs and meters.
A meter pit on the main line.
Right.
In the right, in
Yeah.
the right of way, or just out of the right, it might be better just out of the right of way, so that
If you can
Eric
just
doesn't get
out of
it.
the road, you don't
Eric
get
doesn't get it with the wing, and they
Yeah,
don't get it
you
when they
get it.
plow the driveway, and
Get it out of the road so that if you have to enter it, you're not needing like traffic control.
So where do you put the meters? In the pit?
you put a master meter in the pit that they would read. But the only reason that meter would be read would be to see that there wasn't a leak. They would still read all our meters individually, we'd all get individual bills
But where are
Where-
those individual meters?
in the house.
They're on so the meter itself would be in the basement of the house, but, and they would also have a curb at the
So you would
edge
take,
of their property.
you have the meter pit and then you have a copper line or whatever that goes out 4 inch, whatever you're putting out there up the road, and then there'd be individual curb
Curb.
stops at each house.
Yep.
And then a personal,
Yeah,
service
there would be
line.
an easement for the whole system.
Mhm.
The water operator would be able to exercise that system.
Who
And
owns that from the meter pit on?
I would say that they would have to have an association, so that if it had to be changed, they would have to change it. That would work for Thomas's as well. I think
So-
it,
Kevin, how does that work? Kevin, how does that work? I mean, what happens if they don't do an association?
We can make it as part of their connection.
Connection fee that
It
they
can
have
be
to
a
have?
condition.
and if they don't do it, then the town will come in and fix the water line, and they'll all be assessed.
Mhm.
I mean,
So then the town would own the meter pit and the line
no,
The
up,
town just owns to
just the meter pit?
Yep.
And then
to
the
meter pit,
association
because
line
The meter
owns the
pit is
line.
acting like the equivalent of a curb,
Mhm.
but there just happens to be individual services with curbs and meters at each residence, so as to establish the one-on-one relationship with each new customer for that consumption on a regular basis and the billing and the administrative side of running of the water
I think it's a
system.
lot cleaner if you're dealing with everybody
Side's got a
individually than.
Sorry, go ahead.
So on Firehouse Drive, or you go down the hill, there's a meter pit at the top of the hill. You get down to the bottom of the hill, before it goes into Woodland Apartments, there's a meter right there. So you can track water loss down the hill if we have it.
Mhm. Yeah, it's
So
pretty great.
we've already started to do it. We just actually have to write it into.
I think that makes perfect sense, and then, so what? I guess the other thing we'd have to be clear is at what point do we say, hey, you need to do something? I mean, how close are those meters gonna be? When you take 7 individual meters and you compare them to a master meter, how close do you expect them to be? Because I mean, I don't wanna be going looking for
15% leakage is what's considered
acceptable.
Yeah.
acceptable. but it's also considered, that's when we need to start looking.
And those meter pits you start to get in larger size, your parents, it's a good example. You start to get those larger size meters and meter pits, you're no longer talking about manhole, you're talking about meter pit.
Mhm.
You're in $10,000-15,000 for an install of a meter pit, I'm just saying, recognize that all this comes at
And a cost.
and I use Champlain Water District as a good example, right? I did a bunch of research for those guys this week. They're all solving the same problems you guys are trying to solve tonight. And I think it's helpful to kind of see what other communities are doing and how they're solving it. All of the questions that you brought up and concerns have been addressed by Champlain Water in their stuff that they're addressing.
Yeah, I sent those to them.
Right? So, and may not work for you folks, I'm just trying to tell you what they're doing, right? They have a system set up where they would consider this an extension of the water main, okay? However, the customer, whoever's installing this, your folks, let's say that they're gonna install this, whoever's gonna own that property would own that line from the edge of the public right of way, wherever we put in where they would put in a master shut off, wouldn't necessarily be a master meter, it'd be a master shut off. So 4-inch shut off, let's say in that case, and that would be within the public right of way. They would grant an easement to the owner, or owners in that case, would grant that to the town. You'd have an easement, exactly what this gentleman talked about earlier, so you'd have an access to all of the right of way, if you want to call it that, up through there, where they would locate curb stops, just like we would do on any street here in town. At that point, there's an agreement as well, and the owner has to sign the agreement, or they don't get the opportunity to, and that agreement's pretty strict about what they can and can't do. The water operator is the only one that can touch anything within that system, okay? They need a licensed water operator to do it. They have to have a system designed by a professional engineer. They have to have a professional engineer there to oversee the system construction, just like you folks would in a public water system. They have to certify it. They have to provide as-built drawings. You folks have to accept it. There's quite a lot to it, and in terms of the maintenance costs in the future, if there are things above and beyond normal maintenance, which means, water flushing, that kind of stuff, the owners within that development are responsible to pay the cost for that. And it's all spelled out in the agreement. It's pretty thorough, and it's, I think from my own standpoint, I think it accomplishes a lot of what you folks have talked about tonight, and what your concerns are.
Right now, with the ones we've got going, it's pretty simple because one person owns them all right now. So the easement would be able to be granted and it would be done. And then down the road, if somebody else buys the property, the easement comes with it.
We can own the water pit, even if it's outside the right of way, it can become per the agreement, become town property. Once it's accepted. So there's no harm in the town owning infrastructure, even if it's outside the right of way. But if we decide from the meter pit on, then it's gonna be the association of homeowners, that's fine, but if there's a concern about locating the meter pit in the right of way or highway right of way or not, we can own the meter pit even if it's outside the right of way and make that part of the agreement. So I think we wanna own the meter pit, right?
Yeah, but it should be in the proximity to the distribution line. It shouldn't be like, I keep using the words out in the willy wax. It really needs to be in proximity, so it can be, again, easily serviced, located in it.
And in their case too, the town would need to approve the design, by the way. So it would require work.
And when you say
folks.
the town engineer and water operator, or is it a water commission approval thing?
Well, I would
Because
think
we're
in your
trying to
case, the
set
water
their-
commission would approve it. I would think in that case, you folks would have a review process where they're gonna work with staff through the review process. And, and they're gonna come to you at the end and say, you're gonna say to your staff, does this meet all our requirements and ordinance?
And if they say yes, then we just.
Right.
Kind of like the driveway permits.
Yeah.
So
I
given,
would think,
That's a list of specifications as well as how you want it built.
That's what we don't have in our ordinance.
Right, we don't.
Well, appendix C doesn't exist,
Mm-hmm.
so we listed all these possible standards, American Water Works Association, building codes, all plumber rules, there's about 8 things listed in our ordinance. We never have decided what are the standards. And so you fellas were talking about, well, geez, we were kind of sitting around the table making it up, case by case. And maybe one of the places to start, we get more clarity, is so we select for the engineer's advice, what rules should we defer to and apply, because right now we don't have.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure which ones they should be, but there shouldn't be 8 different options.
CWD spelled all
I was
that
gonna
out.
say, another
What-
water
what do
system
they-
already
what do
spent
they
a bunch of
select?
money doing
They
it.
go with-
Yeah,
They
And the
put everything
person
in
that
there
helped write
exactly
that was
right.
one of the
to the nth
engineers I
degree.
work with, who's thorough.
And they even
Um,
put drawings,
take
here's
different
details if we want you to use, they spelled out the curb stops, the corporation stops, the pipe.
Yeah, we can
Here's
have,
everything we want you to
a-
do.
we can have a design standard like we have for highways, and there's a cross section. And say this is what a meter pit looks like, I guess, but I didn't know what are the base rules that we're referring to, or maybe this Champlain Water District, maybe they figured it out and that's the standard, but then the engineer knows what to come up with, and you guys don't have to listen to whining about, well, that's gonna be more expensive, how about if we?
I guess, I'll give you just a little, as Peter said, I'm doing a little project across the road from my house, gonna be 3-lot subdivision. Okay, one, and I could be before a real pain in the butt and say, well, I ain't sold a lot yet, so next year, Eric, your brand new pavement will cut. I'm gonna put in for a water connection. I'd like to get 3 of them done in the month of May or June before he paves it. I know how that street's been tore up for 38 years. I've been on that street. It's been boom, 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 and I won't be the first one to cut it open. But my engineer, who's not a water, Steve, he's gotta run it through Steve, and EJP, who I talked with, said, why don't you just come 3 cuts off the 8-inch main and go copper for 140 feet. Now, I've told Kevin, if it's gonna be under a driveway, it's gotta be 7 feet deep with blue boarded 3-sided, and it says right in his, and the attorney's drafting that now. If they're gonna, and we're just doing some things right now that, you know, if it's gonna go by a private drive that they're gonna plow, I want it to be insulated and not be froze up. I'm gonna run copper all the way. But if you're gonna tell me I'm doing a meter pit 15 feet off the center of that main,
Well, of course
Not
you're
if they're
gonna do a meter
separate.
pit.
That's not me.
You have separate lines, they're nice and short, and you're taking
I'm
tap
gonna
off the
then go
distribution
plastic.
line, like your project.
Yeah.
Is textbook perfect.
Right.
And I go, easy,
okay,
super easy.
So one thing with the, so
Textbook
Peter's described the meter pit, but then Steve, in your description, you talked about just having a shut off valve. What's the reason, given the 2 options there? And you talked about the meter pit adding great expense to a project.
You will.
Are we okay not doing the meter pit peaker with the way that Steve described that other town, the way that they do it?
The only,
What
The
do
only-
we lose if we
what
don't
we
ask for a
lose,
meter pit?
what we lose is the ability to check for leaks without having somebody come in.
Okay,
So what I would offer you this, and I understand where you're going with that. There will be no, if you use that standard, there is no difference between what they're going to install in terms of quality and what you folks install every day in public driveway. Right, and that's part of the sole agreement. They're gonna have an engineer design it, they're gonna work with you to meet your standards, they're gonna have someone to oversee it when they construct it, make sure it meets those standards, and they're gonna certify it at the end, and you're gonna accept it. So I understand where you're going. If it were a private development, and you said, okay, we're gonna stop the public railway, and what you guys do beyond this, we don't care. In this case, I think you have a vested interest in the whole thing, in offering somebody even the opportunity to hook to a public service. And there's some advantages to the town as well, in wanting people to do that, right? You wanna grow your community, you want that growth to happen locally. That can't happen in a lot of cases without public water. And as long as that is built to that standard, and they're gonna be responsible long-term for all of the costs that are associated with that. Perhaps even if you guys wanted to, the annual maintenance costs for your operators to go out there. Champlain Water actually charges, I'm not saying you have to, it's totally up to you and how you form the agreement, but all of those things can be incorporated. And I think if the goal is to track water, I would ask yourselves, we don't do any of that in the public right of way within any of the water system within the town today, right? If you had a 100-unit development and you said, okay, these are multi-unit, buildings with 25 units in each building, almost like where you do at the fire station, I'd say, okay, that probably makes sense, right? You're gonna send one bill to one owner that has 100 units here, in a high-rise building, that makes a lot of sense. But when you're talking individual folks in a residential development, I'm not sure that makes any sense whatsoever anymore.
So do you put a cutoff on the size line? And the only reason I ask is because Thomas's development's gonna be different. It's 2 apartment houses and 2 houses. So do you meter that and then go with the same type deal, or do you run that the same way and not worry about it?
If you could leave yourself the option, who you don't want within the ordinance, right?
Well, I think,
And maybe
we're
one
trying to
makes sense.
draft an ordinance now, and I don't want, you know,
I think one might make sense in certain circumstances, and the other might make sense in certain circumstances.
They want to put like
So,
1,000 feet of
Would you
plastic
care
water
if
line
the
in.
developer came in,
Okay,
I'm asking you the question for a reason, would you care if the developer, if I was a developer and I came to you and I said, Peter, I want to build this development down here, we've got 20 units, and we're gonna have a homeowners association. We'd like to install a meter pit and meter it, and we'll pay the bill as the homeowners association, and we're gonna put in whatever infrastructure we want beyond the meter pit, would you care? Probably not, right? You'd say, okay, if you're gonna build to our standard up to the meter pit, and beyond that, you're gonna do what you want, great.
Well, what happens when that line breaks or something rather, and they
Right.
don't do what they're supposed to do, and you have to shut off the main
That's where.
the
it's
main
going.
line, and you've just shut off 100 units.
For water quality all the way to taps, so how does that make it right?
Yeah, well, you have an agreement with the owner to tap into the public water system to say that here's who's gonna be responsible for everything from this point forward, right? That would have to be spelled out in the agreement. The second way to do that is the way I described earlier. I mean, and perhaps you leave it up to the developer to say, which way they go. But, I think you guys, as long as everything beyond the meter, or up to the meter is within the public right of way and done to your standards, I'm not sure you would care which way they want to go. It really wouldn't make much difference. You're gonna get paid for the water, one way or the other.
Who are they gonna ask to come find it when it's all messed up and not working
That
anymore?
would all have to be part of the agreement, right? And Champlain.
well, if it's not the water department's problem at that point, because it's
Right.
private.
But they're still gonna be like, hey, water department, we got a water leak. Do I just say, not my problem and walk away?
That's
A piece of paper, not my problem, walk away?
Just a scroll.
No, I think, I think, first of all, we have the meter up by the road, we shut it off and say, okay, it's not bubbling out of the ground, or, oh, we don't know where it's bubbling, then we're gonna let it bubble. And there's a cost for you or Jill to go out with your meter and the association.
At that point,
Has to
you're
pay
not
for
for town of Bristol,
You're
you're
not
private,
working for the town,
you're
private.
charging them.
You can go get your own
Yeah.
plumber, and we have to be on scene once you dig it up, or you can hire us and say, it's right here, and now get a excavator.
I think it needs to be,
Spelled out.
I think it needs to be spelled out in that agreement that
Yes, oh,
that it'll just be divvied up between the. I don't think we wanna deal with an association, I think we'd have a lot better luck, because we can shut one individual user off. We can't shut. all
But
seven.
eventually an association is owned by all the members of that association. You're not gonna have one person there, because eventually the developer, he's gone.
Right, that's what I'm saying, so say it costs $10,000 to fix the water line.
Mhm.
Then that gets divvied up between all the users on that through their water bill. I don't know, is that?
Yeah, but
similar
do
to
you
the way
bill
they
it
do
through the
Champlain
water
Water
department?
District model? Is that where you're going?
I didn't read it, I'm asking.
Their model is each individual water user is responsible for.
but if we,
Well, how do you-
If there is a break within the water line, that has to be spelled out in the agreement on how they're going to deal with it, right? Are they gonna have an association to deal with it? I don't know the answer to that.
Well, I guess that's my question. I mean, does the town then bill, or the water department then bill each individual user, or is just one bill to the homeowners association and you?
In their model, they're responsible for paying for that, not you.
Right, so you send one bill to the association and they figure it out.
You don't send them a bill.
No,
because we didn't-
They would have to get it
I think you're
fixed.
talking about two different things, water usage versus fixing.
Repair.
Fixing.
Right, that's what I'm trying to figure out. You're saying each individual user would be responsible for whatever repairs. I'm trying to figure out, okay, so the town's only still billing just for the water and they're not doing anything with the repairs. That's up to the association to deal with their own.
They would have
Their
to do
own
it under the
units.
direction of the licensed water operator, yes.
Right.
They would be responsible for having.
so if it's going in down 100 feet to 10 units.
Yep.
Then it's splitting off, and it breaks between each 10 units, I'd like to see a curb stop at each 10 units. Plus the,
The what?
There
Meter
will be,
pit.
there'll be.
and then if it's leaking between the curb stop and that meter inside that house, that homeowner pays for it.
Yeah.
If it's leaking outside of it, the association has to pay.
Can I say, I don't feel like we're getting anywhere.
No.
I just feel like we're
We
talking
are.
about a lot of things and not getting anywhere.
Well, Kevin, are you thinking,
Would it make sense for us collectively to draft some
Yep.
language that we think?
with Kevin's help, that's why he's here.
And then,
Well,
I mean, there's some good stuff already in writing. I think.
Well, right, and that's what I
I'm
said to
just-
Val, let's not
I'm
recreate
just-
the wheel.
I'm just curious, like, the difference between, say, a 4-inch line and a 2-inch line.
For every inch, it's 4 times the volume.
I'm just, what I'm thinking, I'm trying to think of dealing with atoms. And so you're saying the 4-inch line can be put in, that's the same as anything anybody else is putting in. Do we want to see extra precautions on, say, I don't know what size line did they for atoms for the apartments?
They
Inch and a half,
chose to
2-inch?
do 2-inch plastic after the meter pit.
So if they did 2-inch and then we put the meter pit at the road, I guess my question is, would you put a meter pit at the road in that case? Would you have a cutoff on a size water line where you would want a meter pit?
Let's put it this way, they're gonna have to get a permit from the state of Vermont if it's for more than a single unit, like more than a single residential unit for each service, they're gonna have to go get a permit anyway. So in that case, I would probably, in your shoes, I would probably say that counts as a water main extension.
Or they could reach
You
out.
can define it any way you like, Peter, but I will tell you, in the Champlain Water District model, that's how they define it. They say, flat out, if you have multiple units, for instance, on an extension, that's a water line extension, and then you go follow our rules. If it's a single house, you're doing a single residential house with a single service for each house, that's different, that's not a water line extension.
Textbook, bam,
Well,
tap on a distribution.
So on one side, he's got two apartment houses.
Yeah.
And on the other side, he's got 2 single-family dwellings.
Mhm.
Is there a difference in your scenario?
Which is coming down North Main, which
Is it coming down off of a single pipe?
2 different plans,
So
one's
that's-
coming off Pine, one's coming off North Street. I think the apartment house
That's
is
a water main.
The apartment houses are coming
It
from
could be
North
privately owned
Main.
water main extension, but it's a water main extension. So
Yep, and it's
That's how they deal with it.
plastic, so it's going through a meter pit.
Yeah.
One thing, when you in a distribution class and you're sitting through it and you're being told that 4-inch water line isn't appropriate, isn't distribution size, that it shouldn't be any smaller than 6. Where do you go with that if you're gonna have multiple poles off that one extension? Realistically, it should be 8, so you can break off, so you get actual fire flow if it's ever needed, if you have to make a larger unit or a larger area. So basically, in reality, the minimum size water line, you wanna put it anywhere is an 8, because you can supply fire flow. Who's gonna have fire flow down in the end of Pine Street down there? Yeah, there's one at the top of the hill, but you guys are gonna have to set up a pond and cycle back to a hydrant. I mean, we're getting further outside the water district, and when you're looking at distribution lines and what they actually are and what they actually do, you don't wanna put in something where you're gonna have to go back and dig it out if you decide to grow your stuff bigger than what it is at this current design size, is all I'm saying.
Planning.
All right, let's kind of, yeah, let's.
I mean, I think those are all
let's
things
kind
we
of,
can find.
where do we want to go, people? Let's, well,
Well,
let
and
Steve
also-
and Valerie and Jill.
Eric's been
Eric
patient
and Eric's
here.
been
Do we
patient.
need any input from Eric on this topic at all?
I got a solution for me.
Let me leave.
Everything overhead.
Thank you, I love that, I would never wanna.
Can we attach to the poles already established around the state?
You want the power underground
So-
and the water line.
Because we
Every time you have a break, we get a
Right.
rainbow.
It is
You're-
now
you're-
set.
you're-
Tell where it is.
Clear
Give it an
pipes.
hour and a half.
Then you
I
can see
love
what's in
it.
there.
I love it.
Okay. we've got-
Yes,
The road
please.
part is standard anyways, anytime that we
Giant
work, that
heat
people
trace,
work in the
thank you.
road, there's a standard already there. And they gotta get it working the right of way permit and all that crap anyway, so I write down the conditions on it, which is normally everything's all the same, you compact every so many inches with whatever.
Put it back to the way it was.
Put it back the way it was, the final inspection is done by the road foreman to his or her satisfaction. So it's pretty straightforward anyways.
So I think the easiest way is to have Jill, Steve and Valerie get together and go through and give us something that.
Pull Kevin in on it.
Pull Kevin in on it.
He's done enough of them.
I've got some
Check.
I found a bunch of housekeeping measures in the existing ordinance to clean up too, so once we're doing this heavy lifting, there's some mess to clean up here and there, but.
I guess I have just an administrative question, it's like, do we need to, A, create appendix C and create a set of construction specifications, and then B, update the ordinance, which takes all kinds of voting?
The ordinance is, it's really easy to, because it's an ordinance, it's easy to adopt and amend, it's just a meeting.
Okay.
It's just on the select board agenda, no
Okay,
public hearings ahead of time or any of that, and so if we amend the ordinance, then we have to print a summary in the newspaper and tell people that they have 60 days for a permissive referendum if the voters wanted to sign a petition to have a vote about what the ordinance should be overturned or put to a vote.
okay,
So that part's real simple. Valerie and I were talking today about whether changing the appendix is actually amending the ordinance. I looked at half a dozen of them online today, so it's clearly no on rates. So it's one of the appendices is the current rate.
mhm,
We can change the rates. It's in the discretion of the water commissioners. That's not an amendment. I think we can do the same thing with the standards. You know, our language in our existing ordinance isn't any different on setting the rates or the standards. So if everybody else is getting away with, updating a standard without actually amending the ordinance, I think that's fine.
so we might be able to handle most of the current issues with appendix C.
Yep, that was the
Yeah,
intention.
You're right.
Well, in that, are we gonna have like, what kind of pipe they can use, what, what size, is that all gonna be in there?
Or you're gonna refer to a standard that says those things. I mean, we printed in like Champlain Water District
Yeah.
or there's it's a reference point.
I guess I have one question for Kevin. The attorney, you know? So we know Francis, I've done a little research. Francis Drive is owned by Tom Buska, the developer. Talked with him the other day. Well, the three of them own that, the three apartments, the two double wide at the end. So if he calls Si and says, you wanna shut that water off on that T on Francis Drive, it's about a 300-foot 6-inch main with a fire hydrant at the end.
Yeah.
And he
It runs down a private road.
runs down a private road,
Yeah.
okay?
And it connects an
Three
apartment
houses.
house and two other houses.
In a house, and then
At
Jackman
least.
Fuels, which never got a permit.
Yeah.
They never got a permit to hook on, Scott hooked them on from there, I believe, from that meter pit behind Jackman Fuels, right?
I'm not sure who hooked them on, but I.
No, you guys did.
Jackman's is hooked on to.
Oh,
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah, really.
so here again, now Adam through Jason Brennan are putting in this development in the back.
Right.
They walk up to Tom Buska and say, hey, we'll pay for half of that cost you had into that water line, we wanna hook up to your water line. We already said we don't own it. Can that be done?
No.
Because they're not connecting to the public water system,
They're not connecting to-
private.
They're
They're
connecting
connecting
to a
to
private
that
line,
6-inch main.
Yeah, but
private
it's not-
lines.
But
You don't have to issue them water though.
Create problems.
You wouldn't have to issue them water if you don't.
They're gonna save them 300 feet, I'm not suggesting it, but at this.
yeah, they ain't gonna pay for 300 feet of 6-inch when they can pay for 300 feet of
No, the
2.
6-inch is already in the ground.
Yeah, half of that
In
is still way
86,
more,
in
still,
86, twice it.
is still
2
way
inch plastic
more
line
than.
rolls out,
Right.
6-inch
Yeah.
comes
Well, I'm
in
just saying,
10 or
if he
20
said, you know, I
foot
can
section.
recoup some of my costs.
You wouldn't approve that, you wouldn't approve the allocation. If you didn't approve the plan, you said, I'm not gonna approve the allocation.
Yeah.
They can't
Illegal.
take water without our permission.
If there's an existing permit, that would be an amendment that we'd have some control over.
That's why I'm just asking.
And
So one of those
unless
neighbors
we've got
put a-
these grandfather- maybe we have
one of those
grandfather
three people put a
systems,
pool
there's no
in?
paper on it, I don't know.
Can they fill their own pool? They get their own fire hydrant. I'm going back
There's
to
no meter on it, so it's
Right.
technically, according to the ordinance, ceiling.
stealing water.
So they could, but if they get caught, it's just why?
See,
And
that's
God,
Champlain
please
Water.
don't
No, you
explain
shouldn't.
Well, and they got.
I told Tom, you were crazy when 86, when the trustees told you, you put it into our specs and then we'll take it over. And you said, no, if you're not gonna pay me for half of it, I'm not giving it to you.
That's why,
I said, you were crazy.
that's why the town doesn't own it. Ugh.
Yeah, he said, no, they wouldn't pay for half of it, in my cost, so I said, no, I'm keeping it.
He thought it was an asset.
He thought it was an asset.
They call it an asset management plan. It should
It's
be called a
a eight.
liability management plan.
So,
So, I think that, well, we've done site plan on that development, I think they've got to come in for conditional uses, so I think that's where we are. And, that's something the DRB can handle.
Yeah.
In the conditional use permit, if we get a heads up, or if we have some clear guidance in the ordinance that we don't have now, I mean.
I think all they need is direction, because Jason will design whatever.
he said
Right.
they're going back to North Street.
Yeah.
They're going all the way back to North Street.
Right, so,
But we still need to be able
Oh,
to
yeah.
shut each one individually out.
But I was just
And I
saying, what if
think
they went
that's-
back to, said to Tom Busker, we'll pay you part of that cost that you had in 86, if you let us. hook on
So
to
the-
86.
so the town can
We
come
can
to.
say no.
Can come to the DRB at that, or the applicant submits a letter from the town that says what the town wants for water, how the water system's gonna work, and that's gonna be a permit condition.
Okay.
If we, we can take care of that really easy if we have the input, through the applicant, the way you have to get input sometimes from the fire department to say, yeah, we can get the ladder up to that fourth floor building.
I'm just saying, I know who owns it now, that's why Tom said, no, I own that. Us and
Well,
the three of
cool,
us.
cause all the research we did agreed with your prognosis, that it never got turned over to the town.
Cause the letter in it from the trustees says, talks about the road. It's a private road, we're not owning it. Didn't say a word about the water line.
Well, but, so we can, if we want, as part of a condition, we can acquire ownership of whatever we want. And so maybe case by case, we decide, we want it to become town property. when
Wouldn't
we
that be though,
accept it.
the more appropriate jurisdiction of the water commission and not
That-
the?
That's what I mean,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, so the DRB just would look to what the water
No, I'm
commission.
talking about the town, not the
Yeah.
DRB.
Okay,
Right,
Town water
but,
commissioners.
but we, so maybe we don't want a blanket rule that it automatically becomes, town property once installed, if it's in a private private road right away. But there's no reason to not give ourselves that discretion in the ordinance to require that, maybe in certain circumstances, you would say, yeah, I think we wanna own that. And cause we wanna be able to take care of it, for whatever reasons, sometimes maybe we don't. But if we gave ourselves that option, that'd be fine.
Cause in 78, they went from my parents' house on North Street, they went across my back parents' lawn, all the way to Meadow Lane.
They
And I
looped
said,
it.
yeah, go ahead,
They
they
looped
looped it, and there's no easement or nothing to say we own it.
Wow.
They made it. So,
I think
Okay.
you're absolutely right, though, we probably wanna leave the option, because I know in the future that the north side of Plank Road is gonna be developed, and it's gonna be enough houses, so it'll have to be an actual water system, actual.
Main,
Loop.
you'll
Yeah,
have to put
Yeah,
in
it's
a
an
loop.
inch to get enough water, fire
Right.
flow,
yeah,
fire flow and
And it's gonna
water
be all
pressure
on
and
private
water
mowing, but
volume.
it's gonna have to be owned by the.
yeah, I would assume that when that
Okay.
finally happens, but that
Are
ain't
we
gonna
about
happen.
done then, people? You guys got your marching orders, I guess?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion and second, and a third and a fourth. All those in favor? Aye, opposed?
Peter, this isn't a brief overnight nap.